and it tells you where all that money was put based on your all's approval. It'll also tell you that the first 2 and now 4 in the public water have been approved, and it shows you how much is left and what we'll be proposing in the near future for part of that. The broadband, to quickly hit on that one, and we're not asking for you to approve any of these expenditures at this time, just to approve the updated plan so we can send an updated plan to the feds, and it'll be part of our quarterly reporting to them. In the broadband, so far it had $4 million in it, and so far you've approved roughly $800,000, which is our match on the state grant. What it shows you in yellow there is there's another grant coming this year. They'll be applying for it, which will be the balance of what did not get approved this past year, and our match would be roughly $1 million on that. And then what that box also shows you is that leaves $2.1 million. Nothing set in stone yet, but in the broadband bucket, it leaves $2.1 million, which Volunteer Energy has agreed to spend on a 50-50 basis, and we're still working with them. We think we'll get a 60-40 out of them before it's over, maybe even better than that. But that doesn't exclude anybody, and it's not making any decision that it all be spent there yet. We'll be coming back sometime after the first of the year so we can start moving on that bucket, because as you know, that's a very time-consuming, that's going to take a long time to get done. But if we can get the other grant, that would be more bang for our buck. But even at 50-50 or 60-40, then the balance of it would be a pretty good bang for our buck also. So that box is not changing. It's just showing you the overall tentative plan of spending the rest of the broadband. The change comes with the sewer bucket and the COVID response. The sewer bucket had $3 million in it. We're proposing to move $2 of that million over to the COVID response. That leaves $1 million in sewer, and to date you have approved $865,000 for septic repairs. That would leave another $135,000 for septic repairs if you so choose, but it does leave some there as a cushion. We're proposing to move $2 of it over to the COVID response bucket. Then in yellow, well, first of all, you'll see what we've already done with the COVID response. We've done the ladder truck. That's been received and paid for, $1,019,000. We've done the trustees' little project. We have an ambulance on order of $195,000. By moving this other $2 million over there, that's where the money from last week's approval, when you approved the 2 additional ambulances for January, that's got the money there for that. It's got money for HVAC units, which the sheriff has gotten estimates on replacing the remaining HVAC units. It's got money for the roof. We still don't have those estimates yet, but we're expecting them to be around the amount that's there, that $400,000. If it is, then we can do the HVAC units and the roof project. And some of you have been mentioning and talking about park lights at Elrod Park on Menace Road. It has money there based on the latest estimate, and then a balance of another project if and when it ever comes true. So that's how we plan to do those. Again, we're not asking you to approve any of those expenditures except for that first one in yellow you've already approved, the ambulances. But today we're just asking you to consider, and next Monday voting on moving $2 million to that bucket. And then the resolution that came around before those buckets came around is there should be a resolution that is moving. That's another one I've got to come. This next resolution allocates that full bucket then to be money that we can spend basically as we choose. It's called the standard allowance. You've already approved the COVID bucket of $2 million being spent this way, and by moving $2 million over, you would need to approve a resolution approving $2 million more, making a total of $4 million for the standard allowance. Why are we doing that? Probably everything on that list might or might not qualify for ARP, but by declaring it standard allowance, we don't even have to justify it. Everything on that list would be, it wouldn't be questioned. We know we could spend it. So the safe route is to allocate another $2 million under the state allowance provision, and that way we know we can spend a total of $4 million in the COVID response. So again, what's in yellow are new changes, new plans, and then that COVID response, moving 2 million from sewer over to COVID response, making it 4 million, and basically leaving the sewer bucket to be all spent for septic repairs. Does that all make sense, or is that as clear as mud, hopefully? I'll stop right there and take questions. Yes, sir.
Mayor Davis, I have a question on you. I was looking at the broadband. Looks like on one of these, it's highlights, there's 2,195,305. I have 50% match to BEC. Is that the same thing that we voted on a while back and we chose to wait on that?
You chose to wait, right. And what you did, Commissioner Blake was discussing, we want to do as many state grants as possible because we get more for our bang. We only have to pay 10%. So what it is, the next state grant doesn't come available until early fall, September-ish. And that's when they will be applying for another $10 million grant. Keep in mind, you approved an $8 million one this past year. So in September, they'll be applying for another $10 million. So if that's approved, we've got the $1 million set aside. That leaves $2.1 million, almost $2.2 million. There won't be another grant cycle, so we will have taken advantage of as much of that 90-10 as we can if we get both of those grants. So it'll leave 2.2. And volunteers saying, if you'll go ahead and give us the go-ahead, we can start working directly with us and Volunteer Energy to spend the other 2.2 million. And they have maps of where it's going to be and so forth. When it comes back to you for approval, they'll have the maps before you that you can look at. But even though it may be a 60-40 grant, you can think of it as a 60-40 grant, it's something they can start moving on immediately. The 90-10 that you approved several months ago hasn't moved at all yet. That's the trouble with the state grants. We get more bang for a buck, but it takes a lot longer to do. So we will have matched 2 of those grants for a total of about $2 million, and then that leaves another $2 million that we can do 60-40 or whatever it ends up being with volunteer to get a total of $4 million. When you total it all together, that's going to be 10, 18 million, 20 million, and if they match at 60-40, it'll be about $23 million worth of broadband, and we invested $4 million. So it's a really good thing. But yeah, but you're not approving that today, but that is the plan. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
It does.
And by the way, from memory, that map that this 2 million is down on the southwest section, I believe. So that'll be of interest to you when the time comes. But we'll address that later. Right now, we're just moving the money to the bucket so we can turn in a revised plan. Other questions? No questions?
Mayor,
Yes.
I know City Fields is scheduled to come on January the 9th and share their update related to where they have spent their money related to housing. Do we have any update from Community Service Agency, Family Promise, or Ocoee Outreach?
You can request them to come if you want to. On Community Services Agency, they finally got the match from the city. Remember when you approved your 100,000, it was contingent upon the city,
right.
And they did that 2 weeks ago, I believe, finally. So that one is finally starting to move, but there's been nothing done on it yet. They just now have gotten word on it. Family Promise and Ocoee Outreach, I don't know, but
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, did you have a question? Howard, did you have a question? I thought you raised your hand. Any other questions? Yes.
Commissioner Blake.
Mayor, on the COVID response, I thought we'd also allocated a small part, I think like 80,000 for continue with the city as well on the library, their 100-year anniversary thing that's coming up, whatever. And when we were in budget last year,
Yeah, you have it in the budget now.
it was
That's probably something I forgot to reflect on here. It's in the budget, so that's already approved. I'd forgotten about it. But yeah, there's an amount in the budget for the library that is coming out of one of these buckets. It's a small amount. It may lower that amount on that last thing in that yellow, yes. That was done in June, July when you approved your budget. I forgot about it, and it's $60,000 or $70,000 or $80,000. Yes.
something like that, yeah. And it's already been approved on the.
Adam, you need to get that amount. I don't know if we've ever done a resolution, an ARP resolution saying which bucket it comes from, but it would be the COVID response bucket. So that needs to be subtracted out of that one.
Commissioner Alford, did you have a question?
The yellows, and looking at the bottom underneath each one, do we have after we spend all the one, if we spend all the one in the yellow, do we have any idea on each one of those buckets, how much we'd have left in the bucket? Have you done that, figuring? It wouldn't be that complicated, but it would be nice to have that somewhere where you could look at it.
Well, take broadband, for example. If you total the three together, it should roughly be the total, 4 million. Public water is the same thing. The only one that's not proposing to spend all of it is the public water, and it leaves, I'll do it in your head, that's 280, roughly 300,000, 1.3, so you still got a couple of $1 million to spend on water. That's the only one that's not being spent in this plan, because these will dribble in like the one that you have on the agenda already. But COVID, it should total up to be all of it. Affordable housings, all of them are all totaled out except for public water. And I assume that public water will continue throughout next year, but there's a lot of money still left there. And again, this is just a plan, so it's leaving the same amount, the entire 3.9 million for water. It's just that to date, we've only approved spending 1 point something of it, so it's still got 2 million to be spent.
So we're going to propose all this out and then see if one of them or any of them will make the criteria, I guess. Or are you anticipating all these to make the criteria that's in yellow?
Right, all of them do, except in the COVID response bucket. And when you declare the other 2 million as, what was that term I said? When you declare, that last resolution I passed out declares the other 2 million to be basically spend it how you want to. So we won't have to meet their criteria on the COVID response bucket. That whole 4 million is we're allotted so much that we can spend without following the criteria.
Do we have any idea on this broadband which direction these grants are going, or where they're going to go with those grants?
Yeah.
What part of the county?
And when we come back to ask for your approval on those, we'll have those maps in front of you. But the first one, if you recall, was roughly the Benton Pike area. That one's already, you've voted to approve it and is in the works. The second one, from memory, when they applied for that one, they applied for a much bigger grant, and they only got about half of it. The second line in broadband is the other half that didn't get approved, and I think that was Southeast.
Most of the 6th district.
Yeah, you know, when we applied for it, it was Northeast and South, and we got the Northeast approval. This would be the other half. So what we'll really be doing there is applying for what we didn't get this time. Now the third line, it will be proposed to be more southwest, I believe, and there'll be a map that tells you this, but I'm just telling you in general areas because that's another unserved area that they're ready to move on and can move on as soon as you approve it. But when you approve those two lines, there'll be maps and exact locations in front of you.
Do we have any idea when the state will talk about this broadband? You know, they talked about giving us more money next year. Do we have any idea when that might come around, and is that those figures in here in any form or fashion? Are we anticipating that?
Yes, they're in there. The second line, $1,025,423. That's the next grant cycle on broadband. And state has told us late summer, early fall. So in September-ish, they'll be applying for the balance of what we didn't get this year, and it'll be roughly a $10 million request. That's where our match is. That's why that second line is there. So if we're approved for that grant, we've got our match in the box ready to go. And that will be, to answer your question, late summer, early fall, according to state. That's when their next round of grants will be.
Anyone else?
Anything I forgot to mention? No, there's $1 million in sewer, but we've already committed 865 of it, so there's not much. There's 135 left, but you still have some sewer money to use for septics if you need more or whatever. The what? Cars. Oh, yeah, when I went down the lines, I skipped the cars, but what we want to have in the plan that you will approve if and when the time comes, you've approved the ambulances, that's the first line in yellow. The second line is $500,000 for HVAC units, that's based on an estimate. The roof, we think is what the estimate will be, but getting an estimate's like pulling teeth, but we have an amount there for the roof. And then underneath the roof is cars. The sheriff, you have done a 3-year, what's it called?
Please.
A lease purchase. You've done a 3-year loan for cars, and we've been paying interest on them for 3 years. What we're proposing to do this time is instead of doing a 3-year loan on new cars, is spending about the same amount of money and just buying the cars out of this bucket, which will save taxpayers all of the interest, the 3 years of interest. So I didn't mention that one, but it's clearly there. That's the fourth line in the yellow. And then an estimated amount for park lights. And then that last line, the number will change once we add the library in there. And that may or may not, of course, none of those may happen. The ambulance is the only one approved, but it was approved before the plan was changed. That's why it's still highlighted.
Mayor, how many $600,000 worth of police cars, sheriff officer cars, how many cars roughly is that?
With the change in prices, it'll be more. How many cars did you get the last time, Steve? You remember? 15 is what we did, but nothing's the same now. It's sort of like the ambulances. So we don't know, but it'll be basically, here's this amount of money and go, you know what I'm saying. He's had discussions about whether he's going to go with the same new cars or he's going to go with something different. We'll address that when the time comes. But the bottom line is we've got $600,000 of ARP money sitting in the bank that we will spend on cars as opposed to borrowing.
So the 15, if you don't mind, the 15 cars that we leased for the past 3 years, it was a lease to own.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, and then another possible around 15 new cars, give or take a few. So around 30 new cars at the sheriff's office.
Well,
in
the first
past 3
15 aren't
years.
still new, but you missed the part about the price won't be the same as it was 3
Okay.
years ago. So it may be 10,
10.
but, and that's the car purchase and the, whatever they call it, putting all the things on it that the cop cars have. But a good question, but yeah, that's an unknown yet, but whenever we get to that one, he will have estimates on what a car is now, what's the delivery time, and it may be sort of like ambulances, where the price has gone really up and the time lag is a problem, but at least we will have had some in our plan to use for that purpose. Today, that's all or next Monday, that's all you'll be approving, is that plan to do that.
Commissioner,
Good question. Yes, Tommy?
Yeah, I guess this is for the sheriff. Out of those 15 cars that we purchased from lease purchase, how many of those are still, is all of those still functioning and running and all that good stuff? Okay. Thank you.
At one time, we did a rotation every 3 or 4 years of doing that. And what I'm trying to get away from is doing them on a 3-year loan. It sounds like good to say lease, but it's basically a 3-year loan. And if we can do, even if it's just 10 or 12, and do them and pay cash for them, it's a savings to the county, and we can use ARP money for it. By declaring that other $2 million, I think cop cars would fit the criteria anyway, a little bit of gray area there, but by declaring the other $2 million, we don't even have to justify. Anything that come out of this bucket, when you approve that resolution, we're okay with it.
So them cars ain't a lease?
The ones we're
They're a
proposing
loan?
would not be a lease, no.
You couldn't buy your lease out?
Well, the lease that we have now will end, and for $1, they're our cars. It's a lease purchase.
Okay.
So
we
we
keep them cars, right?
Yeah, we don't turn them in. This is an additional X number of new cars at some point.
Commissioner Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, real quick, on the public water bucket, the 170 for COA utilities, we've already done that. It was in Commissioner Mason's. The other one in COA utilities, 110. And then these resolutions that you have right here for Rate Shaw and Moore Circle are what we're going to vote on in the next voting session. Then you had the $1 million for Hawaii utility. That's nothing that's been talked about. Or
No, it's not.
The public water was supposed to kind of act more like the HCI. You know, somebody applies for it and we look into it. So you're just earmarking that?
Well,
In general?
it's in the plan. Again, it's not approved by you all. But keep in mind, Hiawassee Utilities provides wholesale water to the utilities, so what's more basic? But
But
with
they-
that,
Okay.
with that proposal, you're only spending 1.3 million. You still have 2.5 million of water lines to do, which is probably as many or more than we can do in the next year. So you still got 2.5 million of these water lines, the HCI water lines you're talking about, 2.5 million. You've only done, well, you haven't done any yet, but you've only approved 200,000 so far. So you've got 2.5 million more. In the meantime, and at the proper time, Hiawassee will come back to you, but they are 1 million short of doing what they need to do. And by the way, if you're thinking of Cleveland Utilities or Ocoee Utilities or whoever, Hiawassee's the wholesaler, and they're in need of another amount of money to finish their upgrades. And so this is a
Well,
perfect place to do that, but it's just in the plan. It's not a done deal.
All right, so that's where I was kind of going with, because over here, when the gentleman came, the 2.19, the 2,193 for Hiawassee was for upgrading. Because I was specifically asked the gentleman that night if you're going to increase your capacities, like not in my lifetime, whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not for increasing, but this other million
So you got
is,
2 million over here in this one. If we were going to give them money, wouldn't we put it over here?
well, that's not our bucket to play with. That's the utility bucket. That's the seventh bucket. Don't let that one confuse you. That is a utility bucket that you all approve the plan, and you've approved the plan, that tells the state, here's how we have approved spending this money. We don't get that money. It's not part of our 21. That's the utility grant bucket that will go directly to the utilities based on the plan you approved. And in that case, that 2.1 million is partly from Matt Mann, partly from Bradley.
Right.
And
That
what I was
for
saying,
That was for upgrades.
yes, and this would be to finish out those upgrades if and when approved by you all. They need another million to finish the upgrades. That one there, in hindsight, could we have given them the whole 3 million? Possibly, but at the time, it was a split between us and Matt Mann, and that 8.6 was the total.
Does that 1 million represent a 50-50 with McMahon?
Not at this point. They're still working with Matt Mann to get the agreement from them. They don't have an answer yet. Matt Mann had a smaller bucket, and they've committed most of their money, so I don't know for sure if they're going to be able to work it out. If they work it out, that number will change. Even though we've always done 50-50, probably 70-30, 70% of the water probably comes to Bradley County. So it helps Cleveland Utilities and all the utilities. Keep in mind, they're the wholesaler for the utilities. So that's worst case scenario.
Right, so basically, that's to be determined to a certain degree.
Right.
They're going, right.
Yeah.
Next thing on the other, back to the code response, the 195,000 for the MS ambulance, is that the one that we're kind of stuck with?
That's the one that is in this year's budget, and so that's why it's not in yellow. And it's ordered and it's promised for January of '24. That's one we could cancel and go a different route if we keep getting pushed down the road, yes.
Okay.
But it's already budgeted, so that's why it's not highlighted.
That's all I have, thank you.
Any other questions for the mayor? Okay,
Not, I appreciate it. Based on the questions, I think we covered pretty much every area. But just mainly keep in mind, except for the ambulances, which you've already approved, this is just a plan change to send in, and then we will come back on each one of these lines that are in yellow to get your approval each time before they can become part of the budget. Okay?
is that it?
That's it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, great. Before we start going around the horn here, I'd like to welcome back Commissioner and new Papa Josh Rogers. And to my knowledge, your beautiful Georgia, Lily Ann, is our first county commission baby.
Wow.
First county commissioner that's had a child born, to most of our knowledge. And you're a lucky man. You're to have a beautiful wife and 3 sweet and adorable little girls.
Thank you.
And we thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Makes us all grandparents, too.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there's 2 resolutions that he had just brought up, or the mayor presented. I'll carry those or put those on the agenda.
Very good. Thank you very much, And we'll start on the right on the
No,
horn.
the two, the resolution dealing
Commissioner-
with the planning. for approval.
Commissioner Beatty,
Everything's going pretty good in the first district.
good. As long as we got that pretty good, we're all right. All right. Commissioner Hughes,
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing to report tonight or today.
you mean we don't have the fumes at the landfill?
I don't want to say we don't.
Okay. Commissioner Alford,
Second district's okay, doing well.
great. Commissioner Blake,
All's well in the third, thank you.
thank you. Commissioner Collins,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All's well in the third. I do want to express a appreciation to the Lynn Jones Foundation. Mr. Jones and his foundation provided an opportunity this last Friday night he gave out 2,100 tickets to Taylor and Oak Grove families for them to participate in the ball game Friday night, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but those families, I think over 300 attended Bradley High School against Ooltewah on Friday night. Those families showed up, had a great time. And sometimes we take that for granted, and I wanted to express the appreciation to him and the foundation for taking the opportunity to give some of our families in our community the opportunity to experience something like that. Great community event. Also appreciate the administration of Bradley Central High School for working with the foundation to make that happen. Those families had a great time, and again, thank you for a great citizen who's helping our community, helping our families. That's really an awesome thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you very much. Is that all?
That's it.
Oh, okay, great. Commissioner Winters,
Mr. Chairman, the Seventh District doing great. The challenge right now is 60 Highway with now the lighting poles are now going up. There is some delays, so if you're making a trip on the west side of the county and city, you might want to take another route rather than 60 Highway for a little while. But that's going to be going, I assume, through the holiday period. But if you can go another route, you probably ought to go another route if you just don't have, and you're not going to be able to wait a little while the traffic is moving forward. But everything's going good in 7th. Thank you.
thank you very much. Commissioner Gilbert,
I'd like to wish everybody here a Merry Christmas. Thank y'all for coming out, being a part of the commission. And everything's looking good in the 4th District, and Merry Christmas.
thank you very much. Commissioner Thompson,
Mr. Chairman, one thing I'd like to mention, we had a gentleman in the 4th District that gave me a call, and he said, this happens a lot, I guess, throughout the district. Said we've had a good year this year in our business. Said we'd like to help pick me a couple of families out that we'd like to help and buy their Christmas. So we went connected with the sheriff's office, and they got us a family from the Michigan Avenue area and also from the Golden Academy with kids, families with kids. And so we know those two families are going to get a good Christmas this year. So we appreciate people in the community that does good financially through the year, and they want to help somebody. Why, that's a good way to do it, and I appreciate that very much. Everybody have a Merry Christmas.
thank you very much. Unless you've been there, you really can't identify with the experience of not having a good Christmas. Commissioner Goins is not here, I don't believe. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recognize Sheriff Lawson for being here today. Thank you for being here today, Sheriff. And since Commissioner Goins isn't here today, I'd just like to let you know the sidewalks are continuing in the 5th District. And also would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a safe Christmas. I won't be here next week, but enjoy your Christmas time with your friends and your family. That's all I have today.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. Everything's well in the 6th District. I don't have anything to report today. Thank you.
That's great. Commissioner Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got just a few things here. Went to the Christmas party, Main Street, Cleveland, Wednesday. That was very nice. Met some of the more prominent people here. It was great to see some of those folks. The HCI grant committee met. When did we meet? Thursday. We got our grant applications in. We'll start on that as soon as those folks get their other grant applications in, so we can review those. We got $109,000 to spend from the HCI funds, and we also got $151,000 worth of grants, so some of those we'll have to do away with. And my granddaughters made sure that I done a Merry Christmas, so they put me a little pin on, so I had to do my little pin. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be back with you all after kind of a two and a half week hiatus, I guess. So thank you for your kind words about the birth of our daughter. She was born almost 2 weeks ago, tomorrow, on November 29th, and she was 7 pounds, 3 ounces, and just a bundle of joy. And I really do appreciate all that the commission did, sending flowers and cards, and Commissioner Slater for bringing dinner over one night. And it was very, very kind of all of you. We are running on no sleep, but if you ask Commissioner Slater, my wife will say that I'm getting enough sleep, but she is not. So I had the privilege and the joy last week to spend a couple hours with a couple dear friends of mine, one of those being the mayor's assistant, Adam Lewis, at Mix 104, raising money for the Empty Stocking Fund here in Cleveland. Over the past 2 weeks, Mix 104 and the Empty Stocking Fund had raised over $215,000 for children, for over 1,300 children in Bradley County, so that they may have Christmas. And last week, last Saturday, they had their Christmas party at Ocoee Middle School, where it was dedicated to Mr. Spengler for all that he's done in our community. In our 2 hours of hosting the morning show, I'm sure there's some of you guys that watched, you could see all of us dressed up in costumes and outfits and just trying to have a really good time. But we were able to raise $36,000 in 2 hours to be able to donate and give to the Empty Stocking Fund. And just want to thank Miss Brenda Lawson for her never-ending hard work when it comes to the Empty Stocking Fund. Former Mayor Tom and Sandra Rowland for their work, and also, unfortunately, thank Steve Hartline for all that he does for the Empty Stocking Fund and for the kids of Bradley County as well. It was a great time. Got to have a little competition as well and raise some money and beat some friends out on donations and giving. So it was a good time. And to end, I will say that we are in contact right now with members of the Recreation Ad Hoc Committee and hope to have a meeting set up sometime in the next couple weeks to be able to start. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Winters has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been called out by the mayor for not being a best bagger of the group and not be experienced. I noticed that the mayor didn't offer to help me during that time, but I do need to thank the one that did help me, Tim Mason. Tim and his father ran a grocery store, ran a store out. And as I'm debating how to keep this bag from being torn apart with the cans that are here, he stepped up and said, let's be partners. And we became partners. And all I had to do was move all the stuff to him, and he put it in there for me. Thank you very much. But we were part of that group that had this trophy today, thanks to him that I got through this. So I learned a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I had two beautiful daughters of Commissioner Collins helping me, and we did a great job thanks to them. Okay, Commissioner Gilbert.
Yeah, the Empty Stocking Fund, Santa Claus, you done an amazing job. You go, Daddy.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, on the agenda items, we have no agenda items today. Communications from the audience. Anyone in the audience? Oh, this is different from last week. Okay, announcements. Next meeting is a voting session on December the 19th, 2022 at 12 p.m. here in the Commission Conference Room. Upcoming events, Wreath Across America, December the 17th, noon at the Veterans Cemetery. And that's it.